Let's talk about running backs that you should start or sit heading into week 13. The good news is no bye weeks this week, so we will have all 32 teams in play, 16 matchups in total, and we're going to cover it all, starting with Turkey Day. That's right. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. Hopefully you have an opportunity to hang out with friends or family this week and kind of, take a load off and relax. And we're going to start off with Bears at Lions. This classic Thanksgiving Day. This is 1 out of 3 games on Thanksgiving. So make sure you are setting your lineups early this week. 48.5 point over under, which is the second highest over under of the week. Very healthy line. We should see a lot of fantasy points in this one. The Lions are favored by 10.5 points, which is the second largest spread of the week, in favor, obviously, of the Detroit Lions. That is great news for your Jahmyr Gibbs and your David Montgomerys. Both of these guys should have big days in fantasy football. The Bears are a top 10 matchup as well. So you've got a couple things really going for these guys. And by the way, I know a lot of people might be worried out there about David Montgomery. He did leave last week's game with an injury. But the good news is, according to Colton Pouncey of The Athletic, he said he asked David Montgomery if he could have came back into the game. He said yes, but Dan Campbell pulled him aside and told him there's bigger fish to fry, and said it was a smart decision that he'll be ready to go for Thursday. So we've already got confirmation that both Gibbs and Monty will be out there. You got to start both of these guys. Jahmyr Gibbs having one hell of a year, RB4 on the season. David Montgomery, a top 12 name, both smash picks in fantasy this year. And on the opposite side of the ball, this is not a good matchup for DeAndre Swift. And we have talked about every week pretty much for the last 3 weeks, asking you guys to go out and sell DeAndre Swift on a high because there is a rough schedule coming up. And this is one of those games we've been talking about versus Detroit. This is the third worst matchup for your running back. So he is not a must start. He is a spot start, right? He's a startable name. You can play him if he's truly your best option at RB2, but he's certainly not in a situation that you would target, right? I think we can all agree on that. But of course, anything is possible. He is a very talented player. Moving on to the NFC East Thanksgiving Day game, 2nd out of 3 total. Giants at Cowboys. So we went from a very high over-under to start the day. Now you're going to have a bunch of food in your belly, right? You're going to have, that coma, if you will, the Thanksgiving Day coma. And this is a perfect time to take a nap because this is the lowest over-under of the week with 37.5 points. The Cowboys are favored in a game by 3.5 points. Look, Tyrone Tracy is a player that you can start. Here's what I'll say. I would definitely monitor reports throughout the week on Tyrone Tracy because we need to be staying on our toes with him. He has now fumbled the ball 4 times this year, and we did see for the first time Brian Daboll take him out last week and kind of punish him a little bit. They did let Devin Singletary lead the way after that fumble, but with Tyrone Tracy just being so damn efficient and exciting to watch, I think they're going to give him another shot. He just cannot afford another fumble. And it is a very good matchup against the Cowboys, a top 5 matchup for your fantasy running back. On the opposite side of the ball, Rico Dowdle has not been a startable name for over 3 weeks. It's been really bad. He's a pure volume play. So if you feel good about the volume, if you think he gets it into the end zone, then sure, but I don't really have confidence to play him in my leagues. The third matchup and the last one on Thanksgiving is Dolphins at Packers. Thanksgiving night. 47.5 point over under, the third highest over under of the week. So again, this is how your day is going to go. You're going to start off with football. That second game, that's when you're going to take your nap. It's not going to be exciting. And then in the third game, you get some pumpkin pie, some sugar up in there, get a little rush going. Then you'll have Dolphins Packers, third highest over under of the week. Packers are favored by 3.5 points. Devon Achane, you know this, absolute superstar. Devon Achane, since week 8 when Tua returned, in full PPR, this is his finishes, all right, each week. RB2, RB24, RB6, RB4. All the guy does is score fantasy points and score touchdowns. Of course, he's in your lineup. On the opposite side of the ball, it's a great matchup for Josh Jacobs. The Dolphins are a top 7 matchup for your fantasy running back, and Jacobs is on a heater right now. Back-to-back games, over 23 fantasy points in PPR formats. We're going to continue to roll with him, and as long as he treats us right, we'll treat him right, all right? Fourth game we'll talk about today, the Black Friday game. They, started doing this a couple years ago, and now it's a tradition, I guess. But we've got Raiders, Chiefs, 42.5 point over under. And this is the largest spread of the week in favor of Kansas City, 13.5 point favorites. Let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs. It is a great matchup, okay? The Raiders are the 6th best matchup for your fantasy running back. However, we do have to acknowledge that Isaiah Pacheco is going to be active. All right. Based off the timeline, just so you guys know, when they activated him off of IR, you only have 3 weeks to not activate the player, if that makes sense. So this is literally the last week. They have to activate him. He has to be ready to go. He will play. That hasn't been reported yet at the time of recording, but I'm telling you, he will play. He has to play. Otherwise, they'll have to put him on season-ending IR. So, the Kareem Hunt people, we've been begging you to sell Kareem Hunt for multiple weeks. Hopefully, you were able to, because now things get real messy. Look, you can start Kareem Hunt, you can start Isaiah Pacheco, but they are desperation plays at this point. It's a great matchup, so you can put them in there and just hope they have a chance at a goal line touchdown. But if both of these guys are healthy, they will share the load, and we really need some sort of understanding of what this backfield will look like before we trust them with any confidence. What I will say is if you had to start one, it would be Kareem Hunt for me. I do think they'll slowly work Isaiah Pacheco into this game plan. But even if you take, let's say, 80% of Kareem Hunt's opportunities and you drop that down to 60%, Kareem Hunt's a complete volume play. So if you take his volume away, there are some concerns. Again, you can start them in deep formats, but I do think most people would have better options. And on the opposite side of the ball, I don't want to start anybody, okay? I don't care if Alexander Mattison is out. I don't care if Zamir White is out. Sure, you can say Amir Abdul is a volume play, like a spot start, but this is the worst matchup in fantasy football for your running back. Gardner Minshew just went down with an injury. Is it Aiden O'Connell leading the way? Is it Desmond Ridder? It's going to be ugly. No, thank you. No, thank you. All right, moving on to the start of the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games on Sunday. What's wrong with me? Chargers at Falcons. All right. 46.5 point over under. The Chargers are favored, but it's one of the closest spreads of the week. J.K. Dobbins did leave Monday Night Football with a knee injury. Now, at the time of recording this, I don't have new information for you, but there is a legitimate chance that he misses next week because of that injury. And it's a damn shame because he's been so good this year. And honestly, before he left that game versus the Ravens, he looked so good. He was looking just absolutely fantastic. Gus Edwards ends up getting the touchdown late in the game. If you need a desperation play and Dobbins isn't out there, sure, you can put Edwards in there. It's not the best matchup versus the Falcons. It's not the worst matchup. I would prefer not to trust one of these running backs, but I know a lot of you guys are dealing with injuries. On the opposite side of the ball, Bijan Robinson, an absolute must start. I don't care if the matchup is bad versus the Chargers, and it is, but when you have elite running backs, you just don't sit them. Just like we saw with Derrick Henry last week, right? Over 100 rushing yards. He would have had an even bigger day. He just didn't get into the end zone. All right, moving on. Steelers at Bengals. All right. Najee Harris, we are going to label him a must start just based off of pure volume, right? 18 touches last week. The week before that, he had 23 touches. The week before, 21 touches. He touches the ball so much that you can play him. But of course, he is one of those guys who's a little bit touchdown or bust. And we are seeing Jaylen Warren worked more and more into the game plan. I would not be shocked at all if this is a Jaylen Warren game. If the Bengals offensively are scoring a bunch of touchdowns, you could see a lot more Jaylen Warren than Najee Harris owners want. And ultimately, if you want to start Warren, it's because you're thinking through this game and you're thinking, well, the Bengals are going to be able to score points. The Steelers are going to have to come from behind. That is your narrative there. Now, as far as the Bengals side of the ball, Chase Brown is the definition of a must start. He has been an absolute superstar, both for fantasy football and in real life, let's be honest. And since Zach Moss left this team with that injury, that neck injury, he has been averaging over 20 carries per game, almost 8 targets, over 131 all-purpose yards, and almost 23 PPR points. I mean, he has been one of the best running backs in fantasy football since Zach Moss has led this team, and Khalil Herbert is not a problem. Moving on to an AFC South showdown, we've got Texans Jags, all right, 43.5 point over under. The Texans are favored by 5.5 points. Let's hope Nico Collins figures his out. Okay, but anyway, Joe Mixon, my RB1 on the week. I have a ton of confidence on a huge bounce back for Joe Mixon this week. The second best matchup for your running backs is the Jacksonville Jaguars. He should go off. Remember, last time he had a favorable matchup, week 11 versus the Cowboys, 3 touchdowns, over 100 all-purpose yards. I mean, the guy was fantastic. We're still going to play him. On the opposite side of the ball, I have look, honestly, I don't even care if you're in a 14-team league. you should not play the Jags running backs. What reason should you play these guys? The offense isn't good. Maybe Trevor Lawrence is back. Maybe Tank Bigsby is back. Both of these guys kind of cock block each other. The offensive line is struggling. No one is being efficient or effective or moving the ball down the field. I just don't see a scenario where you play either of these guys, and it's not a good matchup. The Texans defense is legit against running backs. Moving on, we've got Cardinals, Vikings, 46.5 point over under here, and the Vikings are favored by 3.5 points. Look, you can play James Conner, but lower your expectations, all right? I'm trying to give him respect because, he's been so good in fantasy this year, but it is a very bad matchup. This is the second worst matchup in fantasy football this year. So for you guys in smaller formats, your 8 or 10 team leagues, you probably have a better option. But for us out there in the 12, 14, 16 team leagues, James Conner is going to have to be a volume play for us this week. You're going to have to hope he gets into the end zone. And on the opposite side of the ball, Aaron Jones looks to continue a great game in week 12. He wants to carry that over to week 13 versus a matchup with the Cardinals, which is a top 10 matchup for fantasy running backs. I have high expectations for Aaron Jones, one of my starts of the week last week. We're going to ride him again here in week 13. Moving on, the Colts at the Patriots, 42.5 point over under. Colts are favored by 2.5 points. Man, I'll be honest, as a Jonathan Taylor owner in the Flock League myself, I could not be more disappointed with him in fantasy football. And honestly, I don't really think it's his fault. Watching these games is so frustrating for the Indianapolis Colts. The amount of shotgun that they run, and I get it. Like, I get the RPO, I get Anthony Richardson, I get getting his legs, out there in the open field. But they are giving Jonathan Taylor no opportunity to really get established. They're giving him no opportunity to build momentum into a run. Their offensive line is not performing. But the reason he is labeled a must-start today is because the Patriots are a top 8 matchup for your fantasy running back. The Colts are big favorites. So this should, in theory, be one of Jonathan Taylor's best games of the year. I mean, in theory, it should be. And we don't have many good games left on the schedule. So this is the one, Jonathan Taylor, Johnny, to come out and please have a damn good game. We're counting on you. On the opposite side of the ball, Ramondre Stevenson is a spot start. Look, the reality for Ramondre Stevenson, and I've been preaching this all year, he is a touchdown or bust player. He is. In fact, I did the research for you. In games with a touchdown, he's averaging almost 21 PPR points. In games without a touchdown, about 6.3. There is no in between with this guy. It's touchdown or it's bust, and that's just the reality. So, look, he certainly has a chance to score a touchdown, but not someone I want to rely on a weekly basis. All right, 10th matchup we'll look at here. Seahawks at Jets. 42.5 point over under. Very close spread in this game. Ken Walker must start. Look, I know last week wasn't ideal, but we're going to keep putting him into our lineups. He's getting plenty of targets, plenty of carries. You got to keep putting him in there and believing for good results. On the opposite side of the ball, Breece Hall is going to continue to be a must start for us, regardless of his ups and downs. The good news is if you're a Breece Hall owner, Braylon Allen has pretty much become irrelevant. The definition of a backup running back. He is not a threat to his touches whatsoever. Breece almost at 19 touches per game since week 8. Now, here is the bit of news that we need to follow up on, and I don't have an answer for you today, but you need to follow up on this, throughout the Twitterverse, whatever. People call it X. I don't care what you call it, but Aaron Rodgers, there was a report that came out this week that kind of went under the radar, and they basically said it appears increasingly likely that the Jets will place Aaron Rodgers on IR or bench him over the next few weeks, according to Diana Rossini. So, look, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, I don't think it impacts Breece Hall that much. Remember, last year, Breece Hall with backup quarterbacks was great for fantasy football. That more impacts the wide receivers, but it is something to monitor. The 11th matchup we'll look at is Titans at Commanders. So, the Titans coming off a huge win, right? The momentum, the vibes in the locker room could not be more different than these two teams, right? The Titans on a high, the Commanders on a losing streak, and I'm not liking seeing that from my Commanders, but it is what it is. Tony Pollard, I am going to label a must start. However, here's what I'll say. If Tajay Spears is active, he no longer has a must start tag for me. He goes into that spot start category, depending on your options. If you're in deeper formats, you play him. In smaller formats, you look for other options. Because since Tajay Spears came back before that concussion injury, it was a very split backfield. In week 10, 13 to 10 touches. In week 11, 13 to 6. Snap shares around 58% for Pollard, 45% for Tajay. So again, if Tajay is active, I think Tony Pollard becomes a spot start, not a must start. And the reality is, for this Commanders defense, they've turned it around big time on the ground. They're much better against the run. So be very cautious if Tajay Spears is out there. Let's follow that up all week long. Now, on the opposite side, things don't get any clearer, do they, for the Commanders? It's not a good matchup. Titans have been, pretty tight against the run. They just shut down Jonathan Taylor last week. Now, Brian Robinson had an ankle injury, and according to Scott Abraham, we will be monitoring that throughout the week. We don't know if he's going to play or not. Austin Eckler, I would bet my house on it that Austin Eckler does not play. He left the game with a serious concussion. And, here Jeff Mueller, a doctor over on Twitter Sphere, is talking about it. He says a risk of missing week 13. Again, I would bet my house on him missing week 13. Personally, I don't see it happening. But if Brian Robinson is out, you can start Jeremy McNichols. This team has had success with the run game. And, he is a desperation play at the end of the day. Titans are, not a great matchup. That brings us to the start of the 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games on Sunday. We've got an NFC South matchup, the Bucs and the Panthers. Panthers had a pretty good game last week versus the Chiefs. Respect to them. 46.5 point over under. Bucs are favored by almost a full touchdown. Rachaad White and Bucky Irving, fire them both up, ladies and gentlemen. Just like we said last week, we told you to start both of these names on this video, and they both got into the end zone. Both had touchdowns, but Bucky Irving, for the first time, out-touched Rachaad White and had more snaps than Rachaad White. This is a trend that every Bucky Irving owner wants to see, and this is the best matchup in fantasy football for your running back, so both of these guys can continue to be started with confidence. On the opposite side of the ball, Chuba Hubbard, right now, Jonathan Brooks in his debut really played very little impact. He played 8% of the snaps. He's clearly not ready. I don't know, where the disconnect between the Panthers staff and what they said publicly about Jonathan Brooks' expectations this year versus what's actually happening. It is one of the stranger situations in football, I think. Maybe that's dramatic to say, but Chuba Hubbard continues to be the workhorse, played about 90% of the snaps last week, had 21 total touches. You're going to keep putting that guy into your lineup. Of course you are, right? He's been so damn good. 13th matchup we'll look at here is Rams at Saints. 46.5 point over under. The Rams are favored by about 2 points, so it'll be a close one. Kyren Williams, this is a great game for Kyren Williams to recover that form, for him to look even better and better. He's a top 10 running back for me this week. The Saints are the third best matchup in fantasy football, and he should bounce back. I mean, I'm kind of guaranteeing this right now that he'll get 15 plus PPR points. He hasn't done that since week 8. I think he gets back on that train. I think he gets into the end zone. He should have a fantastic game. And on the opposite side of the ball, not an ideal matchup for Alvin Kamara, but we just saw, Saquon Barkley destroy the Rams. So they are beatable, and Alvin Kamara is a must play, especially in PPR or half PPR formats. Just with the amount of targets he gets, he's just so lethal. The RB3 on the season, of course you're going to put him in there. He's like their only weapon. All right, 14th matchup we'll look at is Eagles at Ravens. This is the highest over-under of the week, over 50 points. We love to see that for fantasy football. The Ravens are favored by 2.5 points. This should be a really fun matchup to watch. Now, here's what I would say. Two defenses that you really don't want to go against for your running backs. Let's be honest. Eagles, Ravens, the Ravens give up the fewest rushing yards per game. The Eagles are one of the best rushing defenses over the past 6 weeks. So, bad matchups, but two superstar running backs that there's no chance these guys are not in your starting lineup. So, you don't need me to waste your time. Of course, you're putting these guys into your lineups, but maybe you lower your expectations, all right? Maybe they're not guys that you expect to be league winners this week. Let's talk about Sunday Night Football next. We've got Niners at Bills. The Niners have got to recover here. Their season is slipping away. 6.5 point favorites the Bills are, and it's a 46.5 point over under. So the good news for the 49ers, according to Nick over on Twitter, Brock Purdy, this was on Monday, did some light throwing without any issue. According to Kyle Shanahan, he's going to rest tomorrow, and then we'll see how the week goes on. They expect him to play, but we'll kind of monitor that throughout the week. I'll be honest, with no Brock Purdy, it does impact Christian McCaffrey because it impacts this offense's ability to, have sustained long drives. So without Brock Purdy, I have a little less confidence, but I'm not going to sit Christian McCaffrey. He's still going to be a top 10 play for me. It's a top 5 matchup for your running backs against the Buffalo Bills. And since Christian McCaffrey returned, he's averaging about 14 carries per game, over 5 targets, and 88% of the snaps. On the opposite side of the ball, 49ers, top 12 matchup for your running back. James Cook, we know how damn good he can be, so he's got to be in your lineup. Of course, there's really not a scenario where you sit James Cook. I mean, man, he's been such a good pick in fantasy, hasn't he? All right, last game of the week. We've got Monday Night Football. Browns at Broncos. Yes, Browns at Broncos. You heard that right. I mean, I love Bo Nix, so I'm cool with it, but there wasn't a better Monday Night Football game out there. Anyway, okay. 41.5 point over-under. It's the second lowest over-under of the week. So if you're counting on someone to save you in your fantasy matchup on Monday Night Football, I don't know. Don't wait up, all right? 5.5 point favorites the Broncos are. I cannot in good conscience, like I've said for multiple weeks now, tell you to start any Broncos running back. How the hell would I do that? Javonte Williams has a good week. Then he's irrelevant. Has a good week. Then he's irrelevant. Then Audric Esme gets a chance. Then Jaleel McLaughlin gets a chance. Then they'll use Tyler Bidet. There's just no point in playing this game each and every week, and it's not even a good matchup to chase anyway. The Browns are one of the worst matchups in fantasy football for your running back. And on the opposite side of the ball, look, sure, you can start Nick Chubb. I think the weather actually helped him a little bit because, guys, he averaged under 3 yards per carry, but he got 20 carries because of the snow last week and got into the end zone twice. I don't know. It's just, I don't think you can really rely on that if you really need a win this week. It's not a good matchup. Look, if he was facing the Panthers, sure, let's put him out there and see what happens, but it's not really technically a good matchup that you should be chasing. But those are 16 matchups. Do me a favor, hit that like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content. And last thing I'll say here is if you have a tough start sit question this week, check out the pinned comment. You can ask me a question at any time on the Flock Fantasy website. And while you're there, if you don't have a free account yet, then go ahead and use our promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, to get a free account on Flock Fantasy. You'll get access to the My Team Analyzer, the Expert Consensus Rankings, and the Trade Calculator as a thank you for using our promo code at sign up. I appreciate y'all for watching the video. We'll see you guys very soon. Wide receivers will be out later. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Did you like the video? Happy Thanksgiving as well. All right, go eat some pumpkin pie. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.